Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video, I want to take some time to talk about loot in Final Fantasy XIV. I played this game for so many years that I kind of take what I know for granted. I can predict the item level or how loot will work, for the most part, with a little bit of variance, depending on when they decide they want to add some quality of life. Now, with that though, there's a lot of new players playing Final Fantasy XIV nowadays, so I figured a series of videos where I explain basic things like this that new players may not know, so that way when new content comes out, unless patch notes say otherwise, you can have a general idea of what to expect. So, going to be doing this in one take, so apologies if I screw up and I end up with a lot of uhs and whatnot here and there. So first of all, before we even cover any of the different types of content, cover a couple things about resets, because the game does have a lot of daily and weekly restrictions that reset at certain times. Now, the daily reset, which we most often attribute to things such as the duty roulettes or Beast Tribe dailies, that resets at Japanese midnight, which is usually GMT plus 9. Now, for me, that can be either 7 or 8 a.m. Pacific because daylight saving. Now, the weekly reset, which is going to be the one we talk about more in this video, actually happens at midnight Pacific Standard Time, or 1 a.m. Pacific Daylight Saving Time, which could be GMT minus 7 or minus 8. I hate daylight saving. Anyway, with that, let's get into the different pieces of content. Let's start with some standard stuff like standard dungeons. You can run those as much as you want, roll on as much loot as you want, be as greedy as you want. On top of that, in levels 61 to 69 and 71 to 79 leveling dungeons, you get one piece of job appropriate loot at dungeon completion. Annoyingly, that doesn't include a weapon, but it's nice to get that little bit of guaranteed loot while you're leveling up. Next is Extreme Trials, which pretty much have the same loot rules as dungeons with a little bit of RNG mitigation to boot. You can roll on as much loot as possible, you can do it as many times as you want in a given week, and go nuts. Now, in level 60 and above Extreme Trials, each boss will drop one totem per defeat. This totem can be used to buy weapons or accessories for that trial, whatever the usual loot for that trial would have been. After several patches, they even add the mount rewards into this, which usually are a pretty rare drop for 99 totems. So if you want to start working on that mount now, once you get to 99 totems, just hold on to those and you can go buy the mount eventually when it gets added. Now, next up are 24-player raids, and this is where we start to actually have weekly restrictions that need some explaining. We don't have a 24-player raid with any weekly restrictions as of the making of this video. We will not have one until Yorha Dark Apocalypse comes out in 5.1, which we're guesstimating will be about an October timing. I'm going to make a video about predicting patch timing just like we're doing for this loot video as well. Now, these weekly restrictions are usually lifted in the next major patch or just before a new expansion release. To be clear, a major patch would be something, since I have a document in front of me, like 5.0, it'd be helpful if I did that, 5.0, 5.1, 5.2. Those are what are considered a major patch, what we would refer to as 5.x. Now, on top of that, there are minor patches like 5.01 or 5.05, and those can contain different things. Sometimes they even have drops for weekly restrictions, depending on the content that we're actually talking about. 5.01 was when Eden's Gate Normal was added, and 5.05 will be when Eden's Gate Savage is added. Now, players may win one piece of armor from 24-player raids per week. It does not matter which boss you got the loot from, only one piece of armor per week. The good news is you can run the content as many times as you want per week and try to win the loot that you specifically want. Players also receive one coin for the first clear per week. Now, we call them coins. There's no guarantee they'll be called that in the future, but when you defeat the final boss of the 24-man for the first time that week, you'll receive an item, I guess we can say. This item is used to purchase upgrade materials for gear purchased with tombstones. Now, that will normally apply to whatever is the capped tombstone for that given patch cycle. We don't actually have a capped tombstone right now in Final Fantasy XIV for Shadowbringers. When patch 5.05 hits, the Phantasmagoria tombstones will be weekly capped, so you cannot earn them unlimitedly per week, which I actually could have probably included in this, but I guess I just did. Now, as expansions add more 24-man raids, higher tier upgrade items usually require an item from each of the 24-man raids. So in patch 5.5, we'll have 3 24-man raids for the Shadowbringers expansion. For an upgrade material, you would need one from all three, the 5.1, 5.3, and 5.5 24-man raids in order to purchase an applicable Tombstone upgrade item. That's to keep people doing the old 24-mans, make sure they stay valuable as patches go on. Alright, I didn't do it in one take, but only because I had to burp, so I didn't want to include that. Now, on top of those two restrictions, players actually receive cracked items for the first clear per week as well. These items can be exchanged for materia that you can then put into your armor and weapons. This restriction is usually removed in the next major patch. And then finally, housing items, minions, or Keshian rolls, all that other stuff, none of that has weekly restrictions or anything. Another cut, just keep having to take a quick break on this one. So then we come to the 8-player raids. Now, these have 3 different difficulties, so we have to have 3 different discussions here. So let's start with normal difficulty. Eden's Gate Normal is out when I'm making this video, the most applicable for this moment. Now, there are weekly restrictions on it, and these restrictions are usually lifted gradually, depending on which item, and we'll cover that per item here. So tokens can be earned from defeating bosses and winning loot rolls. You don't actually win the armor outright, you win tokens that can then go be exchanged for armor. Now, I do cover this in the Eden's Gate Normal videos, which one drops which items, but as of right now, 8 tokens drop per boss, and which ones are available depends on which boss you're fighting. You would need 1 accessory or waist token to get an accessory or belt. You would need 2 hands, head, or boot tokens in order to get those pieces, and you would need 4 body or leg pieces to earn those pieces. Now, this restriction usually lifts in the next major patch, but it is only 1 item per boss per week, so a maximum of 4 of these tokens per week until the restriction lifts. Again, minions or Keshian rolls, other loot, they don't affect any of that, so just roll on those, and if you don't have them, it'll let you actually win them. Now, the good news is, again, players can run normal mode content as many times as they want per week until they get what they want. Once you win the loot, that's when you're locked out of winning anything else. Now, the next one I have labeled as upgrade materials, but it's really items that let you buy upgrade materials. So an item will always drop from the final boss of the normal raid tier once per week. Now, initially, trading 7 of these, meaning it would take 7 weeks worth of normal mode clears, you can use 7 of them to buy a weapon creation item. So in 5.01, that would be the lightweight tombstone. Now, you take this lightweight tombstone, or whatever the item is for that patch, plus 10 tombstone tokens, which again will be Phantasmagoria 5.05, and you can buy 1 unupgraded weapon. This weapon can further be upgraded with items earned in Savage or earned from other content later, such as the 24-man that we mentioned, though that item's usually not available till a little bit later. Now, the number required is reduced to 4 in the next major patch instead of 7, so cutting down 3 weeks worth of grinding to get the item, and the restriction on the weekly drop is removed entirely after 2 major patches, meaning you'll still need 4 of them, but you could just run 4 back to back to back to back, and you would be able to get them all in one go. The normal mode's fairly simple. Savage is where the weekly restrictions get a little bit complicated. Now, again, these weekly restrictions are usually removed later. It's usually like a month and a half or 2 months before the next Savage raid tier, or in the case of the end of the expansion, an expansion release. Now, I kind of did these a little out of order, so bear with me as I kind of scroll and make sure more of them are on screen. So first up, players are only eligible for loot on their first clear per boss per week. You can win as many pieces of loot as you want per boss per week, as long as it's only your first clear. If you try to re-clear that boss after beating it once, you will not be eligible for any loot. Plus, other restrictions will actually apply to the rest of the party that you're playing with. We'll cover those a little bit later down in the list. On top of that, bosses must be completed in sequential order from first to last in order for you to qualify for loot on all of them. If you join a group that's working on a later boss and you haven't cleared the bosses before that, as soon as you enter this instance, and this does come with a warning in game in case you don't realize it, you will be completely voided of eligibility for those previous bosses. So let's say your friend wants you to fight the final boss of a raid tier, this final Savage boss. Hey, come on, man, why don't you come try it? But you haven't cleared any of the first 3 for that week. Soon as you enter that instance for the final boss, you will no longer be able to earn anything from the first 3 bosses. Now, again, that's always subject to change. They could change that after I make this video, and if they do, I probably need to make a follow-up. But for now, that's how it works. Now, with that, each boss also drops a currency, which we as in the community refer to as pages, that can be exchanged for loot of the player's choice. More RNG mitigation, kind of like what we had for the Extreme Trials. Now, the currency only drops on the first kill per boss per week, and this follows that whole sequential order rule that we mentioned earlier. Big warning with this one, and this goes with really any loot in the game. If your inventory is full when you beat the boss, that item is going to hit the ground, be forfeited for the week, and make for a great Reddit screenshot. Now, with that out of the way, we can talk about the individual bosses of a raid tier. As of this recording, we've never had a Savage raid tier be more than 4 individual bosses, or at least 4 individual instances with bosses inside them. Now, the first boss usually drops accessories and a belt. Now, you can exchange those pages we mentioned earlier. 4 of them from the first boss can be exchanged for an accessory of choice, and 6 of them for a belt of choice. For the second boss, it drops a mix of head, hand, and boot pieces, but availability for that varies per job. Not every job's head, hands, or boots are going to drop from the second boss. Some will actually drop from the third boss. Additionally, drops 1 weapon creation component, that lightweight tombstone we mentioned earlier, and 1 tombstone accessory upgrade component. So your choices with the lightweight tombstone are set 4 to 7 weeks of normal mode, depending on the patch, or just getting it from the second boss in Savage. So you do have an alternative that doesn't take as many weeks. On top of that, the tombstone upgrade component, the accessory one, that'll raise the capped tombstone item at the time. It'll raise its item level by 10. So we expect Phantasmagoria items to be item level 460. This upgrade component will let you raise it to 470. Now, 6 pages from the second boss can be exchanged for 1 of those armor pieces, but even the head, hands, and boots from the third boss can be purchased with second boss pages. Kind of weird that they do it that way, but I guess they just didn't want the loot table for the third boss to look so barren. On top of that, 4 pages can be used on that accessory upgrade item as well. Now, the third boss drops pants plus whatever second boss items didn't drop from that one. Additionally, drops 1 tombstone armor upgrade component, so same thing as the accessories, raises another 10 item levels, and 1 tombstone weapon upgrade component, because your weapon can also be upgraded 10 item levels as well. Now, with 8 pages, you can buy the legs, and 4 pages can be used to buy those tombstone upgrade materials. I was distracted by my cat, who not only meowed, but it's also chomping very loudly on his dinner. And finally, we come to the final boss, which drops body armor plus weapons. Now, it additionally drops a weapon coffer that players can use in town to receive a weapon for whichever job they're on when they use the coffer. So let's say you beat the boss as a black mage and you win the weapon coffer, but you really want the white mage weapon instead. You can go to town, swap your job to white mage, then open the coffer, and you would get that weapon. So it allows for the freedom of picking a weapon that you really, really want. Most people will use this on something they're actually raiding on so they can make the boss a little bit quicker next week, but in reality, it's technically up to you. Now, with that, it also drops a mount, whatever normal mode loot's usually there as well, and those just drop, roll against everyone for it. Those are go nuts for them. 8 pages from the final boss can be used for 1 body or weapon of choice. The mount, however, must actually be rolled on from the boss. You cannot use pages on that. Now, in addition to everything we just said, now we've covered the loot table, the restrictions, there are more rules in place. Players who have beaten these bosses, they can go back and fight the bosses again with another group if they really want. However, if the boss is successfully defeated, less loot will be available for the players who still qualify to roll on loot that week. This is to prevent players from, let's say, getting 7 players and running an 8th player through and just letting that 8th player have all the loot. So if 1 to 4 party members who have previously cleared for the week are there, only 1 treasure coffer of loot will appear, and we'll talk about that more in a second. If 5 or more players have beaten the fight for the week, then no treasure coffers will appear, and the only thing you'll obtain is a page. So regardless of how many players have previously cleared, the pages will still be reward to qualifying players. This is what we call a page run in Final Fantasy XIV. And honestly, when you're looking to get a first clear, just trying to get that page run so then you can join the other party finders who are doing 2 chests, 1 chest, whatever. And getting that first clear helps you get into a lot more party finders. So don't be afraid to take a page run if it's what's available to you. Now, when content is cleared normally, 2 different treasure coffers drop to distribute the loot. Each coffer has its own loot table. So for example, I think in the 4th boss and the final boss, 1 is the body armor, 1 is the weapon plus the coffer plus the mount. So it's pretty not stacked. I kind of hope they change that going into Eden Savage for the first tier. But when you're completing it with 1 to 4 players and you only get 1, the coffer that appears is random. So you could either get the phone, damn it. You can either get the one with just the body piece or the one with all the other stuff. So keep that in mind, you're not guaranteed the same coffer every week. Now, with all of that, in patch 5.05, this is something that, again, is predictive, because as of the making of this video, we don't know the exact means through which this is going to work. It was said that instead of individual loot pieces dropping, that coffers like the weapon coffer would instead be what drops in the previous fights as well. So, for example, instead of, you know, just the accessory dropping, it would be an accessory coffer, and then you would open it on the job that you want it on, and you get that. It seems to, they implied things like maybe it would be a weapon coffer, like an accessory coffer of striking, or like accessory wrists or wrists of striking for like monk and samurai, and not like just a general accessory coffer. It's not, we aren't 100% certain on it, so this is tentative stuff. We don't know exactly what will happen, but regardless of what does happen, all those loot restrictions we mentioned before, those are all still going to apply. Now with that, we come to one final thing to talk about: Ultimate. Now, Ultimate is a completely separate fight. It is not the same as the normal and Savage Raid tier. It's one super boss that's taking bosses from old, bringing them up to the current maximum level. They cannot be outgeared, and they drop a weapon that is slightly better than the weapons you could earn from the final Savage encounter, which, by the way, I should have mentioned, those Savage weapons are not the same as the Tombstone weapons. They're better. They're 5 item levels higher than any other weapon available in that patch. When Ultimate comes around, it's the same item level, same substats as the Savage weapon, but it's got 1 extra materia slot. So not much better, but it's still the best weapon of that patch. Now, it does have weekly restrictions. These are usually removed in the next major patch, but way less complicated weekly restrictions than Savage. When you defeat a boss on the Ultimate difficulty, players receive a totem, and you just go take that totem and pick a weapon to get for that week. That's it. That's all the loot rules for it. And because it's just a totem similar to the pages, you can do 7 players that have already earned it for the week and 1 player who hasn't, and that 1 player will still get their totem for the week. So it's definitely not nearly as restrictive as Savage, because there's not as much loot to actually manage. Now, I know it's a lot of information, so I will post this little document in the description of the video so you can reference it and remind yourself in case you just need a quick reminder for it, about to queue into something, doing content for the first time, don't understand it, whatever it may be. And I'll probably do that for the rest of the videos in this series. I might want to clean up the language, I guess, a little bit of this, because someone reading it without the context of the video might be a little bit harder to understand. Just kind of wrote it and wasn't really sure how I was going to do this video. Decided on this kind of very straightforward format for it, but hopefully this information helps. Videos that we're also working on are a patch cycle video, a 5.1 content checklist for people, for content that's not in the launch and will be coming in patch 5.1. We actually know a lot of content coming in 5.1. There's probably more that we don't even know about. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy those videos. And if you have friends starting for the first time, share that or share the document with them. But thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned. We've got more Shadowbringer stuff coming, including job thought videos, job guides, and all sorts of other stuff. Anyway, with that, I'll see you guys in the next one. And until then, take care.